Hello and welcome to this video, Scoring in Relative Keys. This one we're going to look at relative minor after looking at relative major in the last video. We're going to keep this one in natural minor to keep it really simple, and additionally we're going to stay in C major, and we're going to use C major's relative minor, which is A minor, and we're going to make sense of this and learn what all this means throughout this video. Okay, the first thing we need to know is that the minor scale is actually what is called a musical mode. Now, music modes are a whole topic on their own that would need a whole video devoted to it. There are plenty of videos you could look up and understand what modes are. You don't really need to understand that. It would be good to know that though. But it's good to know that the minor scale is one of the modes, and it's the sixth mode. Without getting into modes too much, we have C major here. There are modes correlating to this C major scale that we have, and in fact the major scale would actually be the first mode. Now the minor scale is the sixth mode, also known as Aeolian. The simplest way I can sum up what modes are is that you're going to use the notes in a scale, for example C major here, and if we have the sixth mode, we're going to use the same notes in the scale, but we're just going to start on that sixth note. So if we go over here to the minor scale, A minor, we see exactly what I'm saying. We know that in C major, we have no sharps and no flats in this scale, and when we look at A minor right here, we see no flats and no sharps. So these are the same notes as we see in C major here in A minor, and that is A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You can see what an easy scale this is. It's literally just going A through G, and then it repeats like any other scale. So if you didn't get what I'm saying, it's the same thing as if we go to C major here, and if we start on the note A. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay, so that is what a relative minor is. It is the minor scale that uses the same notes as the relative major. There's a lot of really easy ways that you can figure out the relative minor and the relative major. One really good thing if you're a beginner is to look at the circle of fifths. The circle of fifths is going to have all of your major keys in order, going up fifths and then going down fifths as well. And that's where you'll be able to study all of the different keys. And then on that circle of fifths, it'll show you the relative minor to each major key. And although you might not completely understand the circle of fifths when you first look at it, it's a good thing to study. Makes you ask a lot of questions. Why are the keys going up fifths? What notes are sharp? What notes are flat? And a whole lot of other things. Okay, but that's just one piece of it. And with music, it's really interesting. There's a lot of different angles that you can look at the same thing. So another way to know your relative minor of a scale is if we look at C major here, we have the major scale. And if we go down a minor third from that first note, the root note, the tonic note, then we're going to land on the note A. And the reason why I say a minor third is because we could think about any scale. For example, we could think about G major, and then we could think, what is a minor third below G major, or the note G, and that would be an E. So you see, when you start to understand the circle of fifths, and you understand things like minor third, major third, then you'll be able to have all the scales and the relative scales right just in your head, where you can think about it any time, and it really is not that difficult at all. It just takes some time studying and understanding what's going on. So then the same thing, if we have a minor scale and we have A minor, if we go up a minor third from that root note or the tonic note of this A minor scale, then we're going to have the note C. So again, if you're in minor already and you have that tonic note, the first note of the minor scale, you're in A minor, the note would be A. You're going to go up a minor third, you have the note C, and now C would be the relative major of that minor scale. And then again, if we're starting in major now, we're in C major, and we go down a minor third, now we have A minor, which is the relative minor. And again, the relative major and relative minor, these share the same exact notes, and this is when we're thinking about the natural minor scale. So that leads us to the next section, that here in this video we're going to use what is known as the Aeolian mode, or the natural minor scale. This is the foundation of what a minor scale is, but it's good to know that oftentimes when you're scoring in minor, you're going to be using a variation of the minor scale, and that would be the harmonic minor, which you're normally going to use in harmonic moments, and then you have the melodic minor, which you're normally going to use in melodic moments. Now the difference between the harmonic minor scale is that it has a one note difference between the natural minor scale, and then the melodic minor scale has a 2-note difference with the natural minor scale. So what this does is this allows it to actually sound different when you're using that version of the minor scale. Where I'm going with this is that in this video, we're not going to be able to establish the minor scale as effectively as we could because we're going to stay in natural minor here. I'm going to keep it real simple so we can understand what minor is. This is going to help us understand the relationship between the major scale and the relative minor, and also what the minor scale is. And then from here in the next video, I'm going to have 2 videos where first we're going to have the harmonic minor, and then we're going to have the melodic minor, each in their own separate videos. What's going to be good about this video is since we're just focusing on the aspect of relative minor to that relative major, we can really think about this, and then we can translate this to any other key. We can be in any key, we can think about the relative minor, and then from here we can start to move on to more advanced topics like the parallel minor. Then from there you can get into more complex stuff. You can do some interesting stuff. Like for example, here in C major, we have A minor as the relative minor. Now we could do something interesting where we could start in C major, and then we could think of the relative minor, which is the A, but then think if we were thinking about A major, and then what would be the relative minor of that. And right there we would have an F sharp minor scale. And that would be really interesting going from C major to F sharp minor, but you'll see if you do it correctly, it actually sounds good. And that's just one example of something more complex that you can learn how to do, starting off really simple here with just thinking about the relative minor in its natural state. Okay, so I'm going to get into the actual scoring of the notes here in a second, but before that, this might seem kind of obvious, but I'll at least explain it. And that's that because we have the same exact notes in C major here as the relative minor, we have the same exact chords. Everything is just rearranged, so what this means is that C is always going to be major. We see in C major, of course, it's major, and then in A minor, it's the 3rd chord, but it's still major, and then so on, everything's going to be exactly the same. D, E, and A are minor chords in both of these, D, E, A, and then of course the F and the G are major. We can see that in both the scales, and then B is going to be diminished. Okay, so everything's exactly the same. We have the same notes and the same chords. That's why it's going to be good when we move on to the next videos where we look at the harmonic minor and the melodic minor. But trust me, it's going to be good to start off here first. I'm going to have different things in each of the videos, so no matter what, if you watch all the videos, you're going to learn a lot more than if you skip ahead. Okay, one thing we need to keep in mind is that it's going to be a bit of a challenge establishing that minor scale when these have the same exact notes and the same exact chords. It's going to sound very similar to everything that's in C major because there's nothing different. We're just thinking about it in a different order. So because of that, I'm going to figure out a way to establish C major on the first line here, and then I'm going to establish A minor on the last line here. That's at least going to be my initial goal. I might change it a little bit along the way as I go, but that's what I'm going to strive to do. So this is going to give me enough room to begin and end something that will establish C major on the top line, and then again, the same thing on the bottom line here, but for A minor. Okay, so I'm going to come up with a game plan like I did in my last video, where I'm going to write out the chords that I'm going to use, like a chord progression, and then after that I'm going to fill the notes in. So let's take a look at what I come up with. Okay, so here's what I did. We see I did 2 chords per measure. So a lot of times there's a certain frequency to the chords, and here it's pretty simple. I just have 2 chords. So what this is doing is creating a certain frequency of how often the chords are happening. This means that every 2 beats there's a new chord. Of course, you can take this and go more complex, where you have a more clever version of the chord frequency. Maybe the first 2 measures will have 2 chords, and then you'll have 1 chord in the next one, and you'll keep doing that 2, 1, 2, 1, or something maybe more clever like that. We're going to stay real simple here, and we see 2 in each besides the very last measure. We do see in the top line, we're going to highlight the major melody. We're going to stay in chord 1 in the beginning. We're going to do a first inversion version of that chord 1 just to stay in chord 1 there. And then we see the chord progression goes to 6, 4, 5, 1. And we're not really creating a cadence there, even though it goes back to chord 1. It will resolve because it's going back to the 1, but then we go to the 4/5, we're going to end on that half cadence there, and we're going to have a little pause here. And the reason why we're going to have a little bit of a pause is because I'm planning on holding out that duration for the half note where we get on that chord 5. So those two beats are just going to be one half note that's going to highlight the chord 5. We're going to have a little pause of that half cadence. And then on the next line, we're going to get into the minor scale. Again, we're going to start in chord 1, and then we have the first inversion of chord 1 in that same bar. Then we have the chord progression 5, 4, 5, 1, and then that's just going to go in the next last measure to chord 1. If it turns out this is not enough to establish the minor scale, I might add another measure or two in here as I'm going, but this is the initial idea. Furthermore, I highlighted the major chord in the first line pretty well, and then I ended with that half cadence, which is a good thing to leave us going on to another theme, another key. And here we're going to be highlighting another mode, technically. We're going to use the Aeolian mode or the natural minor scale. So again, it has all the same chords, which is going to make it a little more difficult to establish that this is going to be a new scale, but we're going to be able to do this by starting here on chord 1 and highlighting that for the first measure, and then ending with chord 1, not only in the last measure, but also getting into that in the last two beats of that second to last measure as well. Okay, so just like the last video, I'm going to write all the notes, and then I'm going to talk about what I wrote. Okay, so this is what I did so far. We can see that I added a tempo, moderato, and then we see I wrote the notes. Just like the last one, I started with an anacrusic start. There's a beat before the actual first measure. This is known as the anacrusic start. I really like doing this. I think it has a good sound. I picked up on this listening and reading a good amount of classical music. You see this all of the time, and a lot of times it simply goes from the 5 chord to the 1 chord, and you see that's what I did here. Now I just did half note placeholders for now. This isn't the end of it, but this is just me writing this down for now, and then I'm going to add more notes in between the notes that you see. Okay, so starting with the slower notes, it allows me to make slower moments a lot easier because all I have to do is keep certain moments as they are with the half notes, and then I can add some quarter notes, some eighth notes. We'll see what I do here in a second, but just for now we see the idea. I have an idea of where I want each of the notes in the chord with just 2 voices here. Of course, I'm going to make it more melodic. I'm going to figure out something with the melody that allows the listener to be able to follow along. A lot of times to have a listener follow along, the most simple method is literally just repeating something. A lot of times in music, when we're writing music, we don't want to do anything repetitive, or when we're making music, we oftentimes think, oh, I don't want to repeat something, I don't want to make things too repetitive. But when you listen to most music is repetitive, and that is what makes some of the best music, because you can follow along, but then it doesn't do the exact same thing. There's a little bit of some spice, some variation, and that allows you to follow along and then to be surprised. So I find some of the best music, in my opinion, and a lot of other people agree, has a good balance between having you expect what's going on, you're following along with, oftentimes things are repeating, you expect what's going to happen next, and then you get thrown off because there's that element of surprise. And the balance between that is what really allows me to engage in a song, keep listening, follow along, and then, like I'm saying, have moments that I don't expect. I love that. So we're going to try to integrate that in here. I always try to integrate that in my music. We're going to give this a listen from where it is right now, and then I'm going to add the other notes, and we're going to see what I did. I'll talk about some more stuff, and then I'll talk about the minor scale, the relative minor, a little more. Okay, so now we're going to check it out. Okay, so we see as is, there's already some interest because things aren't just staying in one place. We have some things leaping to different areas, a lot of moments where it's going in and it's going out and in and out, and we're going to be able to use that to our advantage when we're filling notes in the middle of that. And also, if you pay attention and you're reading the notes, you might have to know your intervals and a little bit of some counterpoint, but you'll see I was following the rules of counterpoint more in this one, where I'm approaching the octaves, and a lot of times I'm building chords with just a fifth here with these 2 notes, and I'm making sure to approach those with contrary motion. And even with two voices, that not only allows each of the voices to be heard more independently, but I really just like the sound of it. I like the end product. So now I'm going to fill in some more notes and we're going to check out what I did. Okay, so here's what I came up with. As you see, I put a good amount of quarter notes. I put some eighth notes as well, and I left a lot of these half notes. I was going to put some more notes in the bass, but with the way that I wrote it originally, there wasn't a lot of room to do a lot of things with the bass when I wanted to also do some stuff with the melody, and I thought it sounded better when I didn't do that much stuff to the bass and left it pretty simple. So there's two things there. The first thing is that with how I wrote it in the beginning with the half notes, it kind of put me in a place where it was difficult to actually put some more notes in the bass voice while I was focusing on the melody. So let's say I wanted to do this over and I wanted to write some faster notes in the bass. If I wanted to do that, then as I wrote it, I would be doing a balance of writing some of the notes in the bass, some of the notes in the melody, and I would be thinking about that more. But in this one, I kept it pretty simple, and I actually like the end result of it. It's a little different, and I like when things are unique. I don't want everything to sound the same. I don't want everything to sound like something someone else already wrote. So I'm going to do a brief explanation, and then we'll get into listening to this. So again, we have the anacoustic start, the 5-1. We hang out in the 1 a little bit. We have a chord progression that leads us into a little bit of like a half cadence here, and then we have these half notes on the last measure on the top line here. We get into the second line here, and we see that the melody is different than the top melody. The top melody had its own thing going on, and then the bottom melody has its own thing going on. And since I wanted to establish the difference between the major portion and the minor portion, I wanted to make them a little different, like their own melody, so that's what I did. And then I thought the minor melody on the second line here ended a little early. So I added the repeat bar line at the second to last measure, and then on the first measure of that second line. So these 3 measures on the bottom are going to repeat, and then it's going to go through and then go to the end. After this, we're going to look at a brief introduction of the harmonic minor scale and the difference that it'll make when we add that extra note, and how it will make it sound a little bit more like a different scale and maybe more like the minor scale that you're used to. Okay, so let's listen to what I have so far. Okay, there we have it. Pretty simple. There's only 2 voices here. There's only so much we can do, and I like keeping things pretty simple. I like the idea that it is here, and again, with the 2 voices, we can always add some more stuff in the harmony, some more instruments, whatever we want to do. Okay, so this is like a foundation where we have some bass notes, and we also have a melody. So we could add extra harmony and other stuff wherever, but in a lot of circumstances, you can just keep the bottom line, the bass voice. The top line can be the very top line in the melody, and then you could just add some more stuff in the middle of that. If you are doing instrumental, maybe you're doing something more percussive or something. There's a whole lot of ideas of what you can do, but for now, all that I'm going to show you is that the only difference between the A minor scale and the A harmonic minor scale is that the A harmonic minor scale has the 7th note sharpened. Here we just had a G, now we have a G sharp. Now I deleted the chords on top besides the minor 1, the tonic, and this is because a lot of the chords change when you add that different note. And if you saw my video before this, scoring with the relative major, you can probably make sense of what chords are going to be different. Of course, with these videos, I'm being very simple and I'm not even getting into 7th chords. So just know that once we get into 7th chords, things change even more. We have more chord options, and the music will have the ability to sound more complex as well. Maybe even better. All that will be soon to come. So be sure to check out those next videos where we're going to check out the harmonic minor and then the melodic minor. Now that we understand the relationship between the major and the minor, we can make the minor scale sound more established, like it's actually going into a different scale when we add the different notes that we're going to include in those 2 different altered versions of the minor scale. So that's the end of this video. I hope you learned something. If you enjoyed it, I'd love to hear some feedback. All right, all I have left to say is take care and goodbye.